Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a disassembly video for you on this little guy here, the CKF Gratch, not sure, be Gratch in Russian, so whatever. But anyways, this is a knife that was loaned to me by a viewer, a guy named Mike, and he asked me specifically to do a takedown on it, both because he'd like to see and because, it needs a little bit of love. And so I'm really happy to oblige, and in fact, I gotta be honest with you, I've been looking forward to this all week. There's a lot of... It's a nice knife. You can tell the action's really good, and I feel like the action's going to get even better once I actually take the thing apart. So, looking forward to that. Oh, interesting. So it's got a pivot here that's free spinning and screws in on both sides. Okay, whatever. So I'm going to go ahead and pop the pivot screw out here. That's not how I expected this to go, but you know what? Now that it's gone that way, that ain't so bad. Okay, there's a pocket in the blade, so I'm just going to be very careful because the blade right now doesn't have a pivot, just to make sure that I'm holding on to this blade here. This is a Torx T10, but that's not what I need for the handle screws. Let's see here, maybe T9. Try a T9. Yeah, T9. Okay, popping out the handle screws. But yeah, so I've been looking forward to this. I feel like I can do a lot of good here. And I really do love doing these disassembly videos. Frankly, I love doing these disassemblies, whether it's a video or not. Doesn't really super matter to me. Just because, honestly, it's optimization, it's improvement. Every time I take a knife apart, or a watch, or, well, I don't do watches very often, but fixing things, repairing things, especially these kinds of straightforward mechanical objects, there's a joy here. Every time I finish, I'm better off. And I'm not going to take the clip off, because no big issue there. So go ahead and pop off the carbon fiber. Oh, cool. Would you look at that? So underneath the carbon fiber, there's a second set of screws in here. And they are of a smaller diameter, which I'm not as huge of a fan, but that's okay. So it was T10 for the pivot, T9 for the scale screws. And I'm going to go on ahead and make a little bet here that it's a T8. On the inside here, that's T6. Oh, come on. I bet this is my T8 here. It's the driver extension. No. Wow. Trial and error, my friends. Trial and error. This is T6. Maybe T6 is the solution. Well, T6 is certainly a solution. So the long screws go on the inside here, connecting the back spacer, to the other side. I bet we're just going to find screw holes in there. Whoa, and the whole thing has now come apart. So very gingerly. Good. And there's your back spacer, your bearings, and the rest of the knife. Okay, so put the bits aside here. I need my T9, my T10, and my T6. And let's take a look to see what we got in here. We've got ourselves captive bearings, and those look ceramic. Maybe I'm off, but certainly it looks close. I'm going to go ahead and move my hardware over into the corner. Give me less chance of setting the knife down on top of something. Here is my stop pin, which I will need to do. Drop this fastener out. And this. And the two sides of the pivot that will need some cleanings. That's okay. And here we go. These are the parts. So I'm going to go ahead and use some rubbing alcohol. I actually had really good luck with this the other day, working with a Todd Begg Bodega. And I figured I'm going to try it more often for knives, because rubbing alcohol is pretty innocuous. Aha! The carbon fiber here is attached to that clip here is attached to the handle through the carbon fiber, so the carbon fiber ain't coming off here. That said, this is titanium on one side and carbon fiber on the other side, so I'm not really concerned about any kind of rust issues. So I'm just going to go ahead and leave it on there because, again, if there's a screw you can avoid taking out, you probably generally should. Because, well, it makes everything easier. So there you go. Interestingly, though, you do not want to clean a fountain pen with your rubbing alcohol. Some of them will actually melt, like the polymers and whatnot. So always test an inconspicuous surface first. Here I know it's titanium and I know it's carbon fiber, and neither of those are going to melt off of some rubbing alcohol. So there we go. We're going to wipe off the inside of this carbon fiber chunk. So that's clean. This portion is clean-ish. I'm going to want to get up inside there with a Q-tip. You can see here we've got a lock bar insert, which prevents it from going too far. Well, yeah, it's the lock bar insert and the over travel stop. And one thing that does impress me about this knife that I noticed before I took it apart is that there's a lock bar insert here, but the screw is on the inside between the scales and the here we go. Now you can see the screw is between the scales and the inside of the lock bar there. So it's out of the way, but it's still done right. So I appreciate that very much. Booze it up a little bit more here. Being careful, of course, not to grab a sharp M390 blade by a sharp part, because sharp parts are not something you should be touching unless you're shaving. There we go. So this scale is good to go. This back spacer, go ahead and wipe down the sides here. And this knife is actually in pretty good shape. One little cool note here. You can see how the back spacer is actually, there's a cutout here for the blade to fall into. So that way you can still screw it in, but the blade doesn't hit the top of the back spacer here. Tight little tolerance there, but whatever, works fine. Now I'm going to go ahead and clean off the bearings. Let's see if they're gunky. So, oh yeah, look at that. You know, this isn't a lot of gunk here. I mean, you can see that the paper towel is just barely getting dirty, but at the same time, it kind of is. You know, something with a bearing is very, that's a subtle little adjustment here. And so anytime there's any dirt in there, it is going to affect your action. And this is a knife that has a beautiful action, but I think it's going to be even more beautiful by the time we're done here. Go ahead and clean off the screws. Yeah, this is excellent. It's a nicely designed knife. It's built to be taken apart nicely. No arguments here. So the this pivot here is interesting in that I think this may be soldered or red Loctited or something, so that the pivot here is attached to the side you screw in. Usually that's not the case, and that's not a problem. It just means that we're going to want to rebuild the knife from the presentation side up. Not a big deal, just not the way I usually go about things. Right now I'm putting a little bit of alcohol over here on the Q-tip. I'm just going to go through and hit the bearing races a little extra. Hit the stop pin. And then, very importantly, for the action, I am going to make sure and hit the inside of the pivot there. And also the stop pin race here. Anytime you, well, race, maybe that's not the term, but either way, anytime that you've got a knife that has an internal stop pin like this, it's an area of vulnerability. If you're not able to get in there and clean it out, lint will collect, and that's not ideal. So, there you go. Make sure the detent track is just worn rather than dirty. Sometimes it's a little hard to tell, but this is a knife you can tell has seen love. It's seen a lot of use in its life, and that's beautiful. I enjoy seeing well-used tools, even if mine, by and large, I keep in very, well, they look kind of perfect condition. It's just my idiosyncrasy. There we go. At this point in time, I believe it's just time to reassemble. So like I said, we're going to need to rebuild from the presentation side, and that's not ideal. How am I going to pull this off? So right now, my dilemma here is that the screw with the actual screw goes in on the presentation side, and that has the rest of the pivot here attached to it. And so generally, I don't want to build from the presentation side because there are these underscale screws here. What I think I'm going to do is go on ahead and do that rebuild, and then just pivot the carbon fiber out of the way to do those, to screw these guys into the other side here. So Alrighty, here we go. First step here is to get my nano oil ready. And I'm just going to coat the pivot here. Not being too out of control with it, but I'm sorry, trying to make sure I do all this on camera here. Drop the pivot through, and I'm just going to kind of go back and forth a little bit. That just helps to distribute the oil on top of the pivot there. So there's that. And drop a little bit of oil in here. Go ahead and spin the bearings. That will help to distribute the oil evenly. That's good. Now, that's gonna be just a little tiny bit on there. Why not? Drop that onto there. Okay, let's go ahead and put the stop pin in there. Oh, need to clean off the stop pin real quick. Not terribly grody, but you know, hey. Drop that there. Beautiful. One advantage to rebuilding from the presentation side up is that you can hit the detent ball a little easier. And here I'm using the heavier weight nano oil. There we go. And I'm just going to leave dot here, dot here, dot here. And that'll spread throughout the rest of the blade. On the detent track. Okay, good. Now we're going to go ahead. Oh, there. Little pool of nano oil. It's okay. Going to drop the bearing on, and again, I'm going to give this little guy a spin. Just make sure everything looks good. That should coat those bearings pretty well. Okay. So now what I'm going to do, I should have done this earlier, but you know what, such is life. I'm going to scoot this scale out of the way and drop the backspacer screws through so I can align the backspacer onto this guy. Oh boy. Oh, you little bugger. Don't fight me here. I'm the human. I'm going to win this round. I use tools. Okay, there we go. Perfect. So now we can align the backspacer on the knife. I'm going to make sure I go on ahead and put this backspacer in the right direction. Unlike my strategy for the Spyderco Rubicon, where I decided against putting it in the right direction, because I am not a brilliant man. I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit more lubrication on there. The detent ball is good and lubed. And you know what? While I've got this guy popped open, I'm going to go ahead and hit the inside of the hole for the backspacer here with a little bit of Loctite. That way, I don't have to try and go all the way through 2 layers of carbon fiber and whatnot, and just go straight to the source. That there. That there. And actually, while I'm at it, I'm just going to Loctite the handle screws. That's what keeps the carbon fiber on both sides. Again, not using a whole lot of it. And now I'm going to hit the inside of the pivot here. Okay. Now let's put the thing back together, shall we? So, step 1 is to make sure the stop pin seats. And occasionally, there we go. So that's seated. Now, I need to get the backspacer in. So I'm going to flip this over. Well, I've still got the screw for the backspacers. Going to go ahead and put that in there. Tighten that up. And this here. Those are good and tight now. Excellent. Now, Have I forgotten anything? No, not yet. Soon, though. This is a free spinning pivot, and I'm not super in love with that idea. Just because it tends to make it a little bit more difficult to attach everything. So remember, I've already Loctited this, and this side of it, unfortunately, is not tooled. So what I'm going to need to do in order to secure this is actually to place this plate in on the other side here, and then use the friction of my finger here. You can use like a rubber glove if you're really struggling, but there we go. Got that in there. Beautiful. How tight is that? Oh, yeah, that's a dream. Okay, so we're done with the pivot. I may tweak it a little bit more, but we're mostly set here. I'm going to go ahead and drop the handle screws in. Make sure everything's aligned properly. That's always the trick. There we go. So that's in. Oh yeah, centered too. I knew this was going to be a pleasure. And the other thing, note I haven't done a well, you don't know this, I haven't done a review at all on this knife yet. And very often, one of the reasons I like to be able to disassemble alone a knife, not only is to be able to do this video and because disassembling knives brings me joy, but because that way I'm comparing all knives on equal cleanliness standards. I'm not saying, oh, the action on this is terrible when there's, 15 years worth of dog hair and squirrel turds up inside there. I don't know what kind of life you live. Maybe that's a possibility. So, yeah. So this way I know it's Nick Shabazz clean inside there. And, oh yeah, that's nice. Oh yeah. And so when I do my review, I know exactly where I'm coming from. There's no blade play whatsoever. I'm actually going to see if I can't loosen the pivot up slightly to improve the action slightly. And added a little tiny bit of blade play. I'm going to go ahead and... I mean, don't get me wrong, the action on this guy is really good, but I'm an optimizer. A tiny bit of blade play still, tighten up slightly more. That's about as tight as there we go. Yeah, this is fully locked down now, and the action on it is just great. It's pretty drop-shotty. It's no Norseman, it's no Shirogorov, but by God, at least it's no Shirogorov Neon. But it's still pretty damn good. And on the whole, I'm really happy with this knife now that I cleaned it out here. So, hey, Mike, thank you for giving me the opportunity here. This has been a pleasure. So, anyways, that's how you disassemble and maintain your CKF Custom Knife Factory Gratch, whatever. And, very, very happy to get the chance here. And I hope you all enjoyed coming along with me for the journey. And that you have yourselves an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.